Hello there, friends. Welcome to Sic Podcast Creatistas first Dark Season 3 live stream. Hello. As you guys know, this channel is kind of a weird channel. We created ourselves, made one video, and then popped back out of existence. Very like a temporary time bubble reality, sort of looping off from regular YouTube. And then we disappeared. And then I reappeared. I reappeared here and did a little live stream right before season 3 dropped, sort of talk about what's going to happen. And so what I'm doing with the channel right now is essentially, I don't know how many produced videos I'm going to make. Mostly going to be live streams. I'm going to make notes and then do topical live streams because that's the easiest way for me to make dark content quickly and easily. As you guys know, this is not my main thing. I have a channel called Lucifer Means Lightbringer. I analyze symbolism and mythology of A Song of Ice and Fire, which is Game of Thrones, the books, if you don't know. But with all that said, thanks for joining me, everyone. We are here to talk about dark, and we are going to, I'm going to move this a little bit closer so I can see a little better. It's using my little computer today. And yeah, we're going to talk season 3. I've got some notes. I've got an outline, but definitely feel free to jump in with your questions or comments at any point. Definitely, this was a lot of fun. Spoilers, it was definitely all 3 seasons of Dark. If you want to watch Dark, then you should probably not be watching this video or any other Dark videos. You should go watch a whole series on Netflix and then come back and join us after the fact for these discussions. So I'm going to try to get my friend Pete Peppers has a fantastic Dark channel. He makes the nice 10 to 15 minute produced videos. He's real on top of it. He's already watched the season twice. Been following him since Dark Season 1. So I'm going to try to get him on the channel for a little live chat at some point in a week or two. He's obviously cranking out as many Dark videos as he can right now. And there's a couple other guys. Anthony James is a great new YouTuber covering Dark. So I recommend his channel. And there's another one that I watched too. Let me see if I can pull that one up real quick. That does some really good dark material. Let's see. But we are going to talk a few different things today. Yeah, of course, heavy spoilers and things story cover Dark. But no, there's a certain one that I'm looking for. I'm logged into my other account, so I don't have yada. Well, I will dig this up and find it for you. I'm having trouble finding it right at the minute. But okay, so I'm pulling up my outline here. Cool thing about Dark, guys, is that I'm again coming from A Song of Ice and Fire background. George R.R. Martin, the author of A Song of Ice and Fire, talks about how the heart in conflict is always the most important aspect of storytelling. And he says this because in fantasy or science fiction, it's quite easy to get distracted by the technology, by the magic, the fun stuff, if you will. I'm just checking the comments out here. Okay, so like I said, the heart in conflict, always the most important thing about story writing. And Dark succeeds just flying colors here. Okay, and in case you're wondering, yes, I thought the season 3 was great. I thought the ending was great. Probably would say that season 2 is my favorite overall. But season 3 was great, and the ending was very satisfactory. We're definitely going to talk about the ending quite a bit. We're going to dovetail into some of the characters and some of the different time periods. The first thing I want to do is increase my screen size magnification so I can read this easier, actually. What I want to talk about is, so basically there's two ways to come at this story, in my opinion. We can talk about the wibbly-wobbly time mechanics, the paradoxes, the joint universes, the alternate realities. We're definitely going to talk about that stuff. But the character-driven part of it is really what's so fascinating to me. And that's what makes the story satisfactory. The whole trick as an author, either a sci-fi or fantasy author, You want to do the fun stuff. You want to do the world building and all that stuff, but you can't do any of that if you don't have a good story linking, tying everybody into the beginning. And the thing about time travel stories is that time travel stories are fundamentally about coming to terms with the past, right? Like the whole point of wanting to travel back in time is to change the past. Like you just made some mistake. You're like, oh, I wish I could undo that. We saw a lot of characters trying to travel back in time to prevent someone's death or to rescue somebody who'd been time displaced. So time travel stories are always about coming to terms with the past. And Dark did a great job of mirroring that inside every character's motivations. Like when they were looking at the heart and conflict of all the characters, the first thing they're asking themselves is, what do these people want? What are their motivations? And what is their thing that they're hung up on? And so that's what we see with all these people as they grow older in Winden, is they look back on lost opportunities or mistakes, and some of them get so fixated on them that it basically hamstrings their entire reality. And so, the lesson, if you will, for us as people, obviously, if you don't come to terms with your past, then you're going to kind of be trapped by it, right? And so that's what we see in Dark on a character level, is people being trapped by their inability to move on or come to terms with things. Yeah, so I got somebody asking me why I didn't follow up. Well, because Gretchen and I, the two people who do this channel or started this channel, both have other creative endeavors, which are our primary deal. And this was something we did on the side because we just love Dark so much, but neither one of us had a time to follow up with it. Simple as that. So from now on, like I said, what I'll be doing on this channel is some discussion-based live streams to talk about some of the deeper issues of Dark and some of the fun stuff as well. There's a lot of good short produced videos all over YouTube. And with me having a regular channel, I'm not going to be able to compete with that. However, I do think there's a nice opening for a little bit longer discussion format stuff. Dark is a show which begs for discussion. So we're going to crack open some topics here, and I'll see what you guys think. Let's see. So, yeah, like I said, Dark's characters are always driven by their motivations. And Adam tells us about this, right? He's like, you can't change your actions because you can't change your desires. And Adam does try to change his desires, as far as he tries to kill his attachment to Marta by literally killing Marta over and over again. But his fundamental desire is actually to get out of the trap of Winden, the hell cycle of repeating time. One of the things we find out about Adam is that Adam is not the Jonas who got rescued by Alt Marta. So Adam is the guy who, starting off with Stranger, we found out that Stranger also not the guy who got rescued by Alt Marta and taken to the Alt universe. Stranger just ran into the basement during the apocalypse, came back up, and essentially got to live 15 or 20 odd years in the post-apocalyptic Winden. That's how he got all homeless looking and whatnot. So he's had a hard upbringing there. And that's how he becomes Adam. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What I was talking about is the motivations. So that is how they really ran this show. They talked about everybody, like, are we prisoners of fate? Well, it was more a matter of people being prisoners to their own desires and to their own, like I said, issues, not being able to move on from the past. And yeah, Chow AJ, that was one of my favorite moments when we saw that Stranger Jonas didn't recognize Alt Marta. That's so one of the things that I predicted, I believe it was in the live stream that we did a couple weeks ago, or perhaps it was just in my discussions with Gretchen about Dark. But I always thought that if we could find an origin point, it would be in the 80s. But I'm sorry, that's not what I was going to talk about. So we're always looking for a new action, okay? Like everything is on this loop. Everything is all these repeating cycles. But at various times, Adam and Stranger and Jonas and other people have hinted that we can make small changes. We can move a pebble and by doing so cause a big change. So I was wondering at the end of season 2, when Alt Marta swooped in and rescued Jonas, was this maybe a new action, something that we hadn't seen before? Because I was kind of wondering, like, how did Stranger turn into homeless stranger if he got rescued and taken to Altworld? It made you think, well, maybe Altworld is really, really rough, right? But no, that's not the case. It was not exactly a new action. It turned out to have to do with the infinity sign and how at that moment of the apocalypse, there's two different Schrodinger's cat, possibilities that are existent. One where Jonas gets rescued, one where he runs in the basement. But I did find that interesting that was like a big moment. It turns out that Marta rescuing Jonas was a kind of deviation. And then we found out that Stranger didn't even know Alt Marta. So that was definitely a cool, slow play as far as the alternate reality and how they gave us clues about that. Now, again, starting with primarily character-driven analysis, we'll get into the wibbly-wobbly time reality stuff in a second. Let's start with the Noah and Marta ending. Right? Actually, let me take this question from Donnie Darko here before I dive into the new topic. So he says, Hannah in World 2 is pregnant with Ulrich's baby, right? Everyone is saying miscarriage. What's the point of that if Egon saved the baby? Celia could always be Ulrich and Hannah's child. It seems like from what we've seen in the alt world, everybody has the same parentage. So we didn't see any characters that have like one different parent and one same parent. And that would have been the only example of that. So I think they just chose not to do that. They're kind of showing us that the same two people are going to get together, even if the circumstances are different. Which is something we're going to come back to. So first thing about the ending, and I saw somebody ask me, like, who's the hero? Obviously, young Jonas and Alt Marta, who traveled, back in time in the Prime world to save Tanhaus's kids from driving off the bridge. They are the heroes. They're the heroes not only because they saved the world, but they're the heroes because they demonstrated the heroic ideal of self-sacrifice. And there's obviously strong parallels to A Song of Ice and Fire and what we think should happen with A Song of Ice and Fire. So we have Jonas and Marta. We have this sort of doomed love story. And they jointly decide, to basically sacrifice themselves and the worlds that they know and all of their attachments to basically put things right, to set the Prime world in order. It's very romantic. I love them sort of fading out of reality together, holding hands. Great stuff. I love the fact that old Adam and old Eva, they got to hold hands and share a hug, at the very end too, as they faded out. I thought that was very sweet. Saw the softening of the old sort of arch villains there. That was very humanizing. So yeah, I thought that was a great way to end. And with A Song of Ice and Fire, I think that we'll get something similar. Obviously it's no secret that I'm not a fan of the Danny, Hitler turns into the villain at the last second after saving everyone move. And I don't think the books are going to go that way. In fact, I'm very sure that it's not. And I think that what we will see in A Song of Ice and Fire is a double heroic sacrifice to some extent. I don't know if John and Danny will die together or if one will die and one will have to just be a zombie forever. There's a lot of foreshadowing that John will be, just sort of roaming the north or whatever. The point is, I think that John and Danny are headed for a very similar ending to Marta and Jonas. And you saw how satisfying that was. It was very, very satisfying to see our two heroes sacrifice themselves to save everybody in a way that was very interesting and sort of got at the core of the mechanics of the magical puzzle that was going on. Obviously, it's a sci-fi puzzle with Dark, and with Song of Ice and Fire, we're looking for Danny and John and maybe Bran, the three of them, to sort of solve the magical mystery of the others and the long night and all that stuff. And it's gonna end up, being a self-sacrificing situation where they're both going to have to sacrifice their desires and their wants and then their lives. And both of them have already done that. Danny has already, I'm getting into A Song of Ice and Fire too much, but let's just leave it at that and say that it was very striking how satisfying the ending was with Jonas and Marta. And I really think that that is what Game of Thrones could have done, should have done, and I hope that George will do that. So that I will say. And yeah, John and Jonas are very Jon, Jon Snow. John and Jonas are very similar as far as like they really have a poor lot in life. They're basically good people, and they're just looking for a way to sort of solve problems that are almost unsolvable. So yeah, quiet suffering, sort of stoic, stands there silently when you want them to talk sometimes. Jonas had a couple of those moments. So there you go. Who's being brutal? Katerina was the character that redeemed herself the most. I would like to hear you expand on that, Mary. I can't think of how Katerina redeemed herself. Up until the very end, she was trying to travel back to the past and change things. And she was still trying to save Mikkel, basically, and undo reality. And the thing about that is that is a selfish desire on Katerina's part, because Mikkel's already lived a life. There was that really poignant moment at the end of season 2 where Katerina is in Hannah's house by herself. She's looking through the photo album, right? And she's seeing her son grow up in pictures. And she's realizing, and I do have sympathy for Katerina, of course. Yes, poor Mama Bear. She's not an all bad character like, say, Hannah, okay? But at the same time, that was Katerina's moment. She saw that her son had already lived a life. He already had a life. He already grew up and did all these things. So her going back to, quote, rescue Mikkel is actually erasing his life. Even though it did have a sad end, that was the life that he led. And that's Katerina playing God to try to go back and undo a life that he's already lived. So I don't know about redeeming. Again, I'm open to an argument that I hadn't thought of, but I didn't see something that she did that like redeemed her. She definitely became very sympathetic when you saw the abuse from her mother, and her mother. Yeah, that's a pretty sinister character, for sure, and a gut-wrenching scene. But man, yeah. I'll skip ahead and come back to Jonas and Marta. I have a section here called "People Who Went Back to Change Things of Their Own Volition." And what I noticed is that, and yes, certainly Ulrich trying to kill Helga was selfish too, obviously. Yeah, I mean, the thing we have to remember is that killing people is always wrong. Just like in A Song of Ice and Fire, I've said that, just because Azor Ahai stabbed Nissa to make Lightbringer, that doesn't make him the hero, because killing your wife is wrong. And the same thing here, like killing people just because the cycle has to repeat, that's, it's still killing people. And I think we're supposed to see those decisions, just like you normally would. So yeah, Ulrich going back to kill Helga, that's that's pretty bad stuff. So like I said, the people who go back to change things of their own volition, they never have a good end. I made this list, and you tell me if I missed anything here. But of course, young Jonas first goes back to try to save Mikkel. And he's actually willing to sacrifice himself, erase his own existence to save Mikkel. But he changes his mind, right? And then later when he goes back in time to try to do it again at the end of season 1, he's captured by Noah and middle-aged Helga. So that's actually the least bad one. But let's go through these other ones. So Ulrich, he goes back in time following Helga. And of course, he rots in prison for 33 years and has the near escape and all this stuff, and then just dies in the mental institution. Or in the alt world, he gets killed by old Helga, right? Which was kind of, I would say, what's the word? Not therapeutic, but not Schadenfreude, but like, I don't know. It was, I don't know what the word is, but I definitely was kind of, Helga suffered so much at the hands of Ulrich. So it was, I don't know, it was kind of deserved to see Helga have his moment and just kill him like that. Pretty brutal, but Ulrich point is, Ulrich doesn't end well. He goes back in time to try to change things. He gets what's coming to him, more or less. Yeah. So then we have Helga. Old Helga goes back in time to stop his younger self. And remember, I'm only talking about people who go back in time of their own volition, not people who are sent back in time by other, cult leaders and things like that. I'm talking about people who just are like, oh, I'm going to go back and fix this. That never works. So old Helga goes back to try to stop his younger self and ends up dying in a car crash and injuring his younger self. Cathartic. That's it. Thank you. it was cathartic to watch old Helga kill Ulrich. I have to admit that it was. So then we have Hannah, who goes back in time to the 50s to basically taunt Ulrich and kind of run away from all the mess that she's made in 2019. She ends up getting choked by her son, by Stranger Adam, who is terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Let's see. Then we have Katerina, who went back in time to save Mikkel, and she was killed by her own mother with a rock. Yeah, that didn't go well. And then Noah went back in time from the future, the post-apocalyptic future, to find his stolen baby Charlotte, and he ended up getting used by Adam, made to kill children in the bunker, and then he gets shot by Adam. So, yeah, nobody that travels back in time has a good time. So what are we talking about, Donnie Darko? You're asking me about Alt-World Hannah and Egon. So that was one of the ones that they didn't really tie up. You know, there's a couple of loose ends in this story. It is a really good show. It wasn't perfect. I do have a couple of things that I would have liked to see that they did not show us. Some of the moves they made at the very end happened real quickly, you know, didn't get explained well. And it's just up to us to kind of flesh those out with our imagination. How did that conversation go with Egon and Hannah? How did Egon convince her? I don't know. You know, I mean, you can sort of write your own conversation and dialogue there. Celia was always Ulrich's. I don't know. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, it seems pretty clear that she got pregnant after she went back to the 50s. So Celia would be Egon's. That's also what the family tree shows. So she slept with Ulrich on camera before she traveled back in time. Yeah, I didn't do all the dating there, so I guess I can't be sure about that. But Celia's the girl from the future. I don't know how to change names. Who's got the scar across her face? She's the one who knocks Jonas out and says, "Welcome to the future," and then she travels back and marries Bartosz. And that was a really sweet moment, Bartosz and Celia in the woods there. That was nice. I was happy that Bartosz had some happiness in his life. Bartosz turned out to be a pretty okay dude, despite pushing Franziska down, you know, in front of the caves there in one of the first episodes. So, yeah, the official website says Celia is Egon's. So I'm not sure if the official website is meant to have some false information that we're supposed to, you know, theorize about. But, you know, who is smarter, Adam or Eve? I'd say they're both about the same, really. It's, you know, they both had their moments where they outsmarted the other. It's really all about Claudia. That's why I had to call this Claudia Wins. So, let's go back to Noah and Marta and their ending. I covered a lot of this, but there's a few things I wanted to make. So the ending of Jonas and Marta erasing their own realities to save the prime reality, that was foreshadowed all the way back in season 1 when Jonas, I think it was episode 5, when Jonas tried to go back to the 80s, rescue Mikkel, and erase his own existence. And Stranger had to talk him out of it by saying, your role in this is much bigger than you understand. And then at the end of season 1, again, Jonas decides, I'm just going to go back and rescue Mikkel and erase myself. And the thing about that is that it shows the heroic ideal of Jonas, which is that he's willing to sacrifice himself to sort of set things right. And what he's been trying to do all of his life, essentially, is to set things right. Now, we see that by the time he becomes Adam, this turns much darker. Now he's willing to erase all of reality to sort of put everyone out of their misery. And you can sort of understand that, like, the idea that everything just repeats and repeats with all these brutal murders and all these tragedies and stuff. I mean, that's tough. It's hard to understand Eve's motivation, wanting everything to keep repeating like that, just so she can have her child, who's kind of a monster, the unknown, the triple person who appears, you know, always with all three ages together. So this is one of my criticisms of the show here. Adam / Jonas's motivation the whole time is not actually been to save Marta, but has been to just end the madness. That's what he was trying to do, is end the madness. And so by the time he got to be Adam, he still wanted to do that. He just thought that the only way to do that was to erase Wyndon. But the cool thing is that once Adam was shown that, oh no, I want to talk about Eve. I'll come back to that. So Eve's motivation supposedly was to save her son, right? She was even willing to shoot Jonas at one point in order to preserve the existence of her son. Now, this would have been more believable to me if we had, say, seen Marta give birth to her son. That was a major symbolic moment that needed to be there to me. Eve birthing the unknown. I wanted to know, I mean, that's too tantalizing to tell us that he wasn't given a name, but then not tell us why. That kind of killed me. I really wanted to know why he wasn't given a name. I wanted to know where he grew up and how all three versions of him got collapsed into the same timeline. That seems like a little underdeveloped. And developing that character would have developed Eve's motivations more. That to me is probably the biggest weakness of the show. And I would have liked to have seen 2 more episodes with the final season in order to deal with that. And a couple other things that needed more time. Overall, the pacing of the 3rd season was a little faster than the first 2 seasons. Felt a tiny bit rushed. Maybe not rushed, but just accelerated at times. And I thought that 2 more episodes would have been good. However, I understand also because, man, it was a lot of scenes in this 3rd season. A lot of shooting, a lot of sets, a lot of time hopping. It was very big. It was a lot of work. So I understand you do have to limit it somewhere. But there you go. I thought that Eve could have been better developed, that relationship with her son in particular. The Marta that I was attached to was the one who saw Jonas get shot. The youngest one, when Alt Jonas got dropped off by Alt Marta in the Alt world, that Alt Marta disappeared right away. Then Jonas wanders out into the woods and meets the youngest version of Alt Marta who doesn't know anything. That was very sweet. That was, to me, the best Jonas and Marta romance, actually, in the whole season, or the whole show, was the youngest Alt Marta and Jonas. I really bought that. That's right, Ariadne Martha, you could call her. Yeah, exactly. I really bought that. I loved the way that they came together. Everything about that was just, it was great, tragic romance. I love it, love it, love it. If there is any John and Danny romance in A Song of Ice and Fire, I really hope it has that kind of feel. Brief, fleeting, tragic, but passionate. That's good writing. So really dug that, really got attached to that youngest Martha. And of course, that is the one who saved the world. And I thought it was a really nice parallel when, at the very end, last scene, okay, Jonas, young Jonas, who gets deviated by Adam after the apocalypse, he pops up and he meets that Alt Marta, the youngest Alt Marta, who's now learned some stuff. And Alt Marta realizes that this Jonas doesn't recognize her. It's not the same Jonas that she fell in love with and slept with, a few weeks ago. It's a different version of him that doesn't have that experience. And that Jonas asks her, was the other version of me all that different? And it's the same question that she asked him when he first appeared in her world. And I just loved them giving that line back to each other. It was really sweet. And it really drove home the fact that all these alternate versions of these people are really the same person. They might even, I've seen people suggest that they share the same soul, perhaps. They seem to want the same things and do the same things. So yeah, the Jonas Martha romance was the key, was the center of it. It was really sweet. And I loved how they ended it. And I loved that connection they built in the alt world. So let's see here. And then, so I think that's all I have to say about Jonas and Marta. Oh yeah. So the look on Adam's face, right? After he kills the pregnant Marta, and he expects reality to like blink out of existence, and he closes his eyes and he's like, and he opens them, he looks around, he's like, what happened? That was just so priceless to see a villain that's been built up to the point of Adam, where he just always 1 step, 3 steps ahead of everyone, always he knows how the game is played, always schooling people, and all of a sudden, like, he's just like, what happened? That was, to me, that was a great moment in the show. It was almost funny, but not quite. And we just saw Marta die. It's all very sad and morose, but I mean, it really was a moment to give a villain their comeuppance like that. And the other thing that I thought was interesting about Adam was that, so, okay, by the time he's become Adam, he's very dark, right? And the only way that he can think to end the madness is to erase all of reality. And that's what he's trying to do. However, once Claudia beams in and tells him there's actually a way that we can fix things in the prime world, he then goes for that, which it tells you that even Adam still had a little bit of hope inside of him. When he was given a more hopeful option, he immediately went for it. And he had that sort of, when he appeared in the post-apocalyptic Hannah's house to save young Jonas, you could tell, like, he sounded reproached. He sounded humbled. He really, like, that was a bit of a redemption there for me. Like, we saw that Adam's desire to erase everything really was a hopelessness. It was somebody who had just given up hope. And then all of a sudden he was given a second chance at hope to fix things, and he went for it. So I thought that was awesome. So Jonas in the origin world, that's a good question. And that's going to actually bring us into the mechanics. Okay. So what we've been shown is that things are always going to happen no matter what. So a child is going to be born by two parents, no matter what. Ulrich's going to cheat no matter what. All these things are going to happen no matter what. Even if they happen a little different, ultimately the same thing still happens. We see that Jonas can't kill himself in the post-apocalyptic future. He tries to kill himself and can't. And so that shows you that you can't change the major events. And even if you change the small events, it doesn't seem like it really is going to change the bigger events. And here's what that means. That means that things are kind of always destined to happen, and people are always destined to kind of exist. And we, like, even the idea that Tanhaus's granddaughter, his natural granddaughter, was Charlotte, and then his fake granddaughter, his adopted granddaughter, also ended up being Charlotte, kind of implies that, that's baby Charlotte, that these people are born no matter what. And so I like to think that some version of Jonas and Marta is going to be born and exist in the prime world. Maybe not at the same time. Obviously, they'll have different parents because their parents are all paradoxes and shit. But I think that those souls would still exist, and that they will manifest somehow. Someone saw this on Reddit. It says, Merrick equals Martha and... Oh, that's the username. So Martha and Sonia is an anagram of Jonas, M-A-R... it's hard to follow. Marta and Jonas are symbolically Tanhaus's son and daughter-in-law. Oh, Merrick is the name of Tanhaus's son, which is a combination of... And similar to Martha, I guess. Oh, I see. Okay, I got it. Sorry, guys. So the name Merrick is similar to Marta, while Sonia, who is his wife, is actually an anagram of Jonas. So symbolically, Marta and Jonas are Tanhaus's son and daughter. Oh, that's an interesting implication. That's interesting. And I like how they are... Marta and Jonas are implied as angels, when I guess it's Merrick's wife, Sonia, who says, we were stopped by a couple of angels, or a couple of angels appeared, or it's somebody alluded to that at the end, which is kind of cool. So the question that Merrick and Marta both mean Mars, Chow AJ says. That's interesting. Okay, cool. That's a nice find. That's a very nice find. So I see. Okay, so the follow-up to that is the idea is like Marta and Jonas are the souls that should have been alive in the origin world, but were pulled out and fractured by H.G. Tanhaus. Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's interesting. So because in the alt world, Tanhaus didn't have well, I guess we don't know if he had those kids in the alt world. We never really found out. I guess they probably still died on the bridge. But yeah, the Claudia and Bern Doppler thing sort of came out of nowhere, but you can sort of see how it makes sense though. There was a little bit of a grooming kind of a thing there. It was a little creepy. Obviously, Bern is way older, and then ended up sort of, you know, training her to run the power plant and run the town and carry the town's secrets. So that's obviously a kind of a complex thing there. We don't know when that started, how old, Claudia was. Obviously, that makes a difference. But there's a couple of relationships like that, like Noah and Elizabeth, right? Like that was a mixed up thing. Elizabeth, her dad dies. She looks to be about 14 or 15, maybe at that point, something not any older than that. And then she doesn't have anywhere to go except for to Noah in the caves. But the thing is, like, Noah's in his 20s and she's a teenager. We know they end up getting married, and Noah is basically all that Elizabeth has in the world. So that's a little creepy. But at the same time, they seem to have kind of a nice relationship. I mean, as much as you can in the post-apocalyptic future. They got a little cottage in the woods, and they have a little child, and they look happy. And I don't know, man. It was probably the happiest we've seen Noah and Elizabeth, for that matter. And then what a tragedy for Elizabeth to have her child stolen. And then her husband says, I'm going to go out and get the kid back. And he walks out into the night and disappears. So that was a big tragedy. And it shows you how Elizabeth became so hardcore. Yeah. And I also this is another one where I wanted more. I would have liked a little more time in the post-apocalyptic future. I wanted to see Stranger and Noah's friendship develop after Noah saves him from committing suicide. I wanted to see like I said, Noah and Elizabeth seem to have had a sort of some times of happiness. I could have used at least one or two scenes of that. That would have been cool. I wanted to see also when Noah stormed out of the cottage, after baby Charlotte was stolen. He was going to confront Claudia. We saw him confront Jonas and accuse Jonas, and Jonas is kind of denying it. But then we know that he went to confront Claudia, and somehow Noah ended up time traveling out of the post-apocalyptic future once Claudia got that machine working. So did Noah demand that Claudia turn it on, and then Claudia finally made it work? Because remember, Claudia, at the instructions of her alt self, was keeping the thing from working. So I would have liked to have seen that confrontation between Noah and Claudia, because Noah blames Claudia for stealing Charlotte, and he's blamed her for that for his whole life, and she didn't actually do it. So wanted to see more of that, but that's okay. Yeah, more Agnes too. That's another one I wanted to see more. Yeah, there was a lot of implied history with her and Noah that we didn't see, and also her history with the unknown. We didn't see that either. So Agnes was definitely someone that could have been developed a little more with a little more time. Definitely agree with that. Yeah, and you can also see about Elizabeth that Noah became the only thing she had left, and Noah was comforting her with basically talking about the prophecy and talking about how things will get better and Sic Mundus and all that stuff. So, yeah, and we still don't know why Agnes killed Noah. We don't. Yeah, I don't know why. Just because it had to happen or it was done. I really don't know. That one, like, why did a sister kill a brother? Did Noah do something really messed up to Agnes? Like, that wasn't really fleshed out. I agree. Let's see here. And yeah, so Agnes and the unknown, how did they get together? How did Tranta get born? Yeah, that was one where I could have used a little more information. Definitely. And I also wanted to see Bartosz get the tattoo. Like, give me that scene. You know, we see mostly Bartosz going against Stranger, who turns into Adam, and we don't see Bartosz like indoctrinated at the level where he gets this big tattoo on his chest, which he's got the same one that Noah has. So could have used the Bartosz gets a tattoo scene. And obviously extra fucked up that Noah killed his own father. I mean, Adam really was a full cult leader by that time. You know, getting someone to kill their own father, that's messed up, dude. I really feel like Bartosz is one of the most tragic characters. And Noah is tragic in a different way, because Noah just gets he gets indoctrinated by Adam, and then he indoctrinates Helga. And it's this cycle of indoctrination and abuse that's passed on between those three characters, which is how it happens in the real world, unfortunately. But let me see. Let me go back to my notes. Yeah, I liked Bartosz. Okay, so what I want to do is go back to the time period of OG Sic Mundus. This was one of my favorite highlights of the show for me, because I've already dove into it. So I like the fact that Stranger, Bartosz, Magnus, and Franziska traveled into the arms of Old Man Tanhaus and an already existing cult. So, because originally it was obvious at the end of second season that they travel back to the 1800s and create the Sic Mundus that we meet in 1921. But the question is, like, how does Stranger become Adam? Well, the Old Man Tanhaus, the blind guy, he was awesome. What an awesome character. That kind of explains it. So when Stranger goes back into the 1800s, think about the mindfuck that this is, right? So as soon as he gets to 1888, which I don't think that Stranger knew that that's what was going to happen. It's basically like the apocalypse amplified the energy of the box time machine, and it traveled 4 intervals of 33 years instead of like 1. And so we ended up in 1888. As soon as he gets there, it clicks in to Stranger. He's like, oh, God damn it. This is how I become Adam in 1921. So he knows right away he's not going to be able to get out of that reality. He's going to be stuck there. He's going to turn into Adam. And so he's so ashamed by that he's unable to tell the rest of his crew that he is Adam. He doesn't tell Bartosz and Franziska and Magnus, and Bartosz basically beats it out of him. But even though Stranger was really being a dick at that point and really being overbearing and like mean, he's mean to old Marta, I still felt bad for Stranger, because you understand why he kept that a secret. It's like, man, I'm going to turn into Adam, who I've just built up as the enemy. And like, he was thinking that he could avoid it somehow, but he's realizing that he can't. Then we see that his thinking was shaped by Old Man Tanhaus, the blind guy, and also just the already existent Sic Mundus cult, which is very cool. It makes sense that it already existed. I didn't think that Stranger necessarily dug out that entire underground cult lair and the caves and all that stuff. So it makes sense that when he appeared in 1888, there was already a secret society, one of those lodges, downstairs, essentially under the church. Basically, it's like a Masonic lodge, and we've identified this strain of occult symbolism and thinking that they've been using since season 1, that it goes back to like Freemason and Illuminati kind of stuff. So it was cool that they actually tied it back to that, going all the way back to 1888 and showing us that there's been this secret lodge that's existed for some 30 years there. And that's essentially, like I said, Stranger and his crew time traveled right into the arms of a cult that already existed. So very cool. Yeah. And a cult. So very cool. Loved that. Loved all of that stuff. Loved all the scenes building the time machine. That's why I use this for my background. Love all that steampunk, Dr. Frankenstein, H.G. Wells kind of stuff. Super awesome. I want a whole show about that just set in that time period, man. But anyways, that was cool. We can see Stranger's getting really dark. I mean, Stranger with the Adam suit, makeup deformations was absolutely just, man, that was pretty scary. And him strangling Hannah, that was really dark. I mean, I know the show's called Dark. I know that people hit each other with rocks and do messed up stuff, but Stranger letting out all his pent-up frustration on his mom, even though Hannah's a messed up person. Wow, dude, that was just messed up all the way around. So yeah, and it very cool. Yeah, when the unknown kills old man Tanhaus, he gives him the eyes to see. A man may convince himself that nobody can lie. Quote that Clausen uses. I think that's a clue that the unknown is the one that sent that letter to Clausen. That makes sense to me. Donnie Darko asks if time travel cult already exists in the origin world, would it not be inevitable that time travel is invented, possibly when Merrick has his own family tragedy in the future? Yes, I think that is implied. It is implied that the world isn't safe. If Tanhaus can blow up the world in 1986, then somebody else could discover the same technology and do it at a different time. Absolutely. So we'll have to hope that whatever heroes are born from the time family tree paradoxes and the alternate worlds that are created by the new apocalypse, that those heroes will do the same thing that Marta and Jonas did. So yes, it could all happen again. Nothing is safe. But Tanhaus at least isn't motivated to do it because his children didn't die. So yeah, it does. I think it is intentional that they want to leave us with the feeling that this is inevitable to someone, that someone will invent time travel. So yeah, pretty cool. Let's talk about Claudia. I titled this Claudia Wins, and indeed I think that she did win. So she wins because she figured it out. She's the only one who figured out how to undo the knot. She's the only one that figured out that there was an origin world. So definitely she was the one who cracked the code, who solved the puzzle. I thought that Claudia shooting her alt self was like maybe the most badass thing that anyone did in the whole story. I mean, wow, the balls that it would take to shoot your own self, like to point the gun in the mirror, if you will, and shoot someone that looks like you. Also just the risk, like she didn't know what was going to happen. I guess she got a little bit of confirmation when she asked alt Claudia if she'd ever seen an older version of herself, and she hadn't. That told Claudia that alt Claudia doesn't have a future. But still, that was awesome when she figured that out. And then she goes about playing both Eve and Adam, which is amazing. And she plays Eve. She shows up and poses as alt Claudia. Maybe some of you guys might not have caught that, but after she kills alt Claudia, she shoots her in the head so that none of her clothes are ruined, and then saves her clothes and puts them in a little trunk or something. And later we see Claudia getting out the alt Claudia costume and then appearing in Eve's lair and like running a game on her. So yes, Claudia, by far the most badass motherfucker around. I don't know if she's supposed to be Lilith to Eve's Eve. She could be the snake. You could see her as the snake because she's kind of the one. She's the one who runs the power plant. She's the one who, like I said, solves the puzzle. She has the most knowledge of the dark matter. She solves the dark matter puzzle in the future. But I'm not sure about that. I have to think about that a little more. The White Devil, she's called the White Devil, so that could be a way of alluding to her as the serpent. And I got that from Anthony James, by the way, the Anthony James YouTube channel. He identified that serpent symbolism. No, that wasn't Anthony James. I take it back. That was another one that I need to find. Let me do this real quick for you guys so that I can give everyone their proper credit. Oh, shoot. Okay, so if I go to my history of the videos that I watched, this was Geekin' with James Hancock. Yeah, so he did actually, no, okay, I take it back. So I'm going to recommend both of these ones. I watched a couple dark videos today. I think it was actually Anthony James who identified identified Claudia as the serpent via the White Devil idea. But I also checked out a cool video from Geekin' with James Hancock, which I enjoyed very much. And so that's the name of his channel, Geekin' with James Hancock. I recommend that one. And then that other channel that I was trying to remember that I couldn't earlier, I've got that one too. It's called The Binge Zone. And the fellow's name there is Challen, and he's really cool. He's got some really great ideas. So let me go ahead and just drop some of these links in the chat for you guys. I will put them in the description too. Here is Geekin' with James Hancock. And here is, let me get Binge Zone up for you. Binge Zone is really cool. They cover more than just dark. I like how high energy that fella is. He's really cool. I want to see if I can get a hold of him. And then let me find the Anthony James channel too, so I can drop that link. And I think everybody knows Pete Peppers, but definitely check out Pete Peppers. He's put out some cool videos. Oh, Anthony James is pulling up all kinds of stuff. Yeah, so let me definitely give you the channel link for this one. It's a little harder to search. Copy. Drop it in there. Okay. So there we go. There's all your references. So yeah, Claudia, like I said, she could be you could see her as the serpent for sure. I always thought that the origin had to be 1986 because the time caves are anchored to 1986. The time caves were kind of the first thing that we were shown as far as the time travel. All the boxes and stuff, they use the black goo that comes from the power plant. The caves are right over, there's a portal in the caves because of the machines that have been set up, and the bunker's right over the caves, and the time machines in the bunker work off of that energy. So the fact that the caves are rooted to the 80s and can go, forward and back 33 years convinced me that the origin event must be in the 80s. So I was very satisfied that the alt-world origin event was in 1986. Kind of makes you think that the power plant overload that created the dark matter to begin with in 1986 was some sort of an alt event of Tanhaus blowing up the world in 1986, right? It's along the lines of like things are going to happen no matter what. Some version of the thing is going to happen. So instead of Tanhaus blowing up the world, we had the destabilization of the reactor, which almost blew up the world and created the dark matter. So I liked that. I liked that the origin. I also liked that it happened in the bunker because that makes it draws another link. It's like in the Prime world, the time travel fuckery started in the bunker right over the caves. And then we go, into the first alt dark reality, Jonas's world that we saw in season 1. We see all the time travel starting with the bunker in the caves. So it was a very satisfying way to give us that thing. Like, there's no way any of us could have guessed that it was like, oh, it's, the butler in the library. It was Tanhaus in the Prime world that we didn't know existed. Nobody could guess that, but once they gave it to us, I thought it made a lot of sense. So yeah, and as far as so Claudia mentions, Donnie Darko's commenting that Claudia mentions there is some residue that gets left after each cycle in the apocalypse. I don't remember the details of this though. Any thoughts? Well, so this gets into the question of how many cycles there have been. So let's think about this. Now we're going to go into the theoretical, brain-breaking stuff here. Time travel doesn't really work. Okay, it doesn't. It's like it's paradoxical no matter what. Anytime you want to write a time travel story, you're writing around paradox and you're trying to work with that, find a believable way to explain it. Dark uses a couple of things. They use the alternate reality. They use the infinity things, the Schrodinger's cat idea where there's two versions of each alt reality. Ultimately, they needed the Prime world to resolve everything. But here's the thing, okay? So from the moment the Prime world blows up and creates the alternate worlds, the alternate worlds then start spinning on their first cycle, right? The first time around wouldn't be necessarily the same as like the third and fourth cycle, because it seems like every time the cycle goes around, people are making changes, people are going back into the past. Like, for example, Prime World 1986 blows up. Now we have two alt worlds that are created, 1986, right? And then they start spinning. Jonas isn't born until 2019, and he can't be born unless Mikkel goes back to 1986. So you can start to try to unravel the layers of it and say, well, one of the first things that must have changed in the alt world, somehow Mikkel travels back so he can give birth to Jonas. And later we find out that it's Jonas who led Mikkel back into the caves. But I was starting to speculate that maybe the first time Mikkel time traveled, it couldn't have been Jonas that led him back into the caves, because that would be a paradox. And the mind wants to resolve the paradoxes. It could be that the answer is that as soon as the alt realities spring into existence, all the bootstrap paradoxes spring into existence, and they're just fully formed paradoxes from the beginning. But the only other possibility would be that once the alt realities spring off, they start these cycles. And as time travel gets developed and the time travelers go back in time and edit the past, those edits are like new layers on top of the old layers, right? And so, like I said, the original event has to be the creation of the dark matter in 1986, the power plant meltdown, because no time travel can happen until that happens. But we saw that the person who caused the destabilization of the power plant in 1986, that created the dark matter, was the unknown abomination child, who can't be born until many paradoxes have happened. And he, in fact, caused many paradoxes himself. He went back to the 1888 and killed the blind man Tanhaus, and he's the one that got the permit for the power plant approved and all this stuff. So unless the answer is all the paradoxes spring in fully formed as soon as the two new realities are created, the other answer is that there has to be layers that get edited. And so what happens is the first time around, the power plant destabilizes on its own. And it's only later, once the unknown exists, that he goes back and causes it. But I don't know why that you would need to do that if it already happened on its own. So I think the answer is that it's just, so I don't know how to change names. Says, when the world is created, the world's time isn't linear. It spreads backwards and forwards simultaneously. That's probably the answer that makes the most sense, because it seems like they didn't want us to resolve the paradoxes, But my brain still says someone has to write the book. The book that Tanhaus gave to himself to write, like somebody had to write it at first before it can turn into a looped thing. But they just, they didn't give us that answer. So that's another way, I guess what I'm saying is another way that you could do a time travel show is to create layers that get edited and leave a path for the reader or the viewer to unravel those layers and sort of get back to the original event. And that's what they were trying to do in season 2, when Adam and Jonas were like, oh, it's when Mikkel hangs himself. That's the original event. It turned out not to be the case. And it turned out that there was no original event in the paradox worlds. The original event was in the prime world, which, again, I was satisfied with that answer. But another way they could have done it is to create an individual event that isn't a paradox. But they didn't go that way. So, yep. It's good stuff. It's definitely, like I said, time travel doesn't really work. You always end up with paradoxes. But I thought that the way they wrote around it was very, very good. Many people have called this the best time travel show ever made, and I probably have to agree with that. So, and just in case anyone missed it, Claudia solved the puzzle because she figured out that Regina exists without time travel people. I had always thought since the first season that all the children of time travel are going to have to poof out of existence by the end of the story. I didn't expect that most of Winden would be time travel babies, although halfway through season 2, I was starting to wonder if maybe everyone was a time travel baby and everyone was related. But it turned out that Claudia, knowing that her father was not a time traveler, it was not Tranta, but rather Bernd Doppler, that told her that Regina would exist without time travel, which means there must be a world where time travel didn't happen. That was her logic. That's how she figured it out. So very cool. I love that she was able to put that together. She was also able to figure out the thing with time standing still. She heard that on the radio. The French scientist figured out time stood still. She heard it. She obviously knows how to do all that stuff. So there you go. I'm going to go ahead and so I'll close with this question. How do Martha and Jonas disappear if they're needed to break the cycle in the first place? If they don't exist, then they can't break it. Well, I mean, it's just more paradox stuff, but they existed in the sense that the original reality blinked out of existence. The alternate realities were created. They spun around, and eventually Jonas and Marta went back in time in the real world. So actually what we were left with is a very simple time travel story. Somebody blew up the world, and then two people from the future came back and stopped it from happening. And then they blinked out of existence once they had changed the future. So that's actually pretty standard stuff as far as time travel goes. What happens if we watch Dark backwards? Oh God, don't ask me that. Don't ask me that. There's probably a lot of mirrored stuff, but anyways. All right, guys, so that's it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here at 1 hour. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll be doing more Dark podcasts in the future. It'll be kind of like this. I'll take notes and, won't just be willy-nilly. They'll sort of pick topics to go at and probably do like hour live streams on each one. So thanks for joining. If you enjoy the channel, if you enjoy what we're doing, then like the video, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that button. We've got like 300,000 views on our first video and 5,000 subscriptions. So hit that subscribe button, folks, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Sic Podcast Creatus Est.